Biblical scholars have argued for years about the location of these holy sites. Now, one man says he might have found them.
To satisfy such a quench and a dying of thirst, Jesus is that rock for us, spiritually.
The Holy Lands. Beneath my feet, just rocky desert. This is incredible.
In 2025, a drone operator named David Chen watched his screen flicker with data that should not exist. 40 feet beneath a mountain in Saudi Arabia, his radar was mapping something impossible. Rectangular chambers, perfect right angles, a network of rooms spanning 300 feet, sealed and untouched for 3,000 years. His hands were shaking when he called his supervisor over. Within minutes, the entire research team had gathered around one monitor in silence.
These do block off these archaeological sites that we believe are linked to Moses and the Exodus, which prevented really high-quality video and photos from coming out to the outside world.
Saudi Arabia climbing the real Mount Sinai.
What they were looking at could rewrite human history. For decades, this mountain had been sealed behind armed guards, barbed wire, and silence. Dismissed as a military zone, erased from scientific curiosity. Anyone who asked questions was turned away. Anyone who tried to enter was arrested. But the location of these buried chambers aligns perfectly with ancient descriptions of the mountain where Moses stood before God, where the Ten Commandments were given, the birthplace of Western civilization itself. If this data is real, we may have just found proof that the Exodus actually happened. This is the story they never wanted you to hear.
12 springs and 72 palm trees. Behind me is where they would have come from the Red Sea, up through this channel, this chasm.
The wrong mountain. Let me tell you about the greatest misdirection in religious history. For over 1,500 years, millions of pilgrims have traveled to a mountain in Egypt called Jabal Musa. A famous monastery sits at its base, St. Catherine's, built in the 6th century by the Byzantine Emperor Justinian. Tourists climb those ancient steps every single day, believing they walk where Moses walked. Churches teach it. Textbooks confirm it. The location has become so established that questioning it feels almost heretical.
Now the amount of evidence around Mount Sinai here, which today is called Jabal Machla, reveals this place is indeed the true Mount Sinai. It is all quite convincing, so let's now look at all of the evidence here at this Mount Sinai.
But here is the problem nobody wants to talk about. The evidence does not match, not even close. The Bible describes Mount Sinai as a place of fire and smoke. When God descended upon it, the mountain burned. The ground shook violently. Smoke rose like the smoke of a furnace. The entire peak was engulfed in what can only be described as volcanic fury. Now look at Jabal Musa. It is granite, solid, stable, geologically dead granite. Geologists have surveyed every inch of it. There is no evidence of volcanic activity, no scorched rock, no thermal damage, nothing that could explain the cataclysmic events described in Exodus. Then there is the geography problem. According to the biblical account, the Israelites crossed the Red Sea and traveled through a region called Midian before reaching the mountain of God. Here is what scholars have known for centuries but conveniently ignored. Midian was not in Egypt. It was east of the Gulf of Aqaba. It was in what is now northwestern Saudi Arabia.
In the ancient land of Midian right now, near the town that locals describe as originally being the land of Jethro.
When we visited this area, multiple Saudis approached us to tell us this is where Jethro and Moses resided. They excitedly pointed to an ancient well that is fenced off and marked as an archaeological site.
The route described in Exodus leads directly away from the Sinai Peninsula and toward the Arabian Desert. So how did we end up at the wrong mountain for 15 centuries? The answer is politics, power, and one very influential monastery. In the 4th century, Christianity had just become legal in the Roman Empire. Pilgrimage became an obsession. Believers wanted to see the places mentioned in Scripture with their own eyes. They wanted proof, and the church needed to provide it. So when a small group of monks settled beneath a mountain in Egypt and claimed it was Sinai, nobody questioned them. Emperor Justinian built a fortress monastery to make it official. The site accumulated wealth, influence, and political protection. Challenging it meant challenging 15 centuries of tradition, millions of devoted pilgrims, and one of the oldest Christian institutions on earth. But here is the catch. While the world accepted a mountain that showed zero evidence of the biblical account, the real Mount Sinai was sitting in plain sight, guarded, restricted, forbidden, until 2025, when a single drone changed everything.
Researchers disagree as to whether the blackened rocks are actual evidence of God descending upon the mountain as a fire like the Bible says, or whether it's natural volcanic rock. A small handful of Americans tried to sneak into this area in the late 1970s and the 1980s. They were arrested, and their photos and videos were confiscated by the Saudi police.
The Forbidden Scan. In the northwestern corner of Saudi Arabia stands a mountain called Jabal al-Lawz. For decades, a small group of researchers argued this was the real Mount Sinai. The location fit the biblical route. The geography matched. Local Bedouin tribes had called it the Mountain of Moses for generations, but nobody could prove it. Saudi Arabia would not let anyone look. The region was classified as restricted. Military installations dotted the landscape. Armed patrols guarded the approaches. Archaeologists who applied for permits were denied. Film crews were turned away at checkpoints. The only evidence that leaked out came from adventurers who snuck in illegally and smuggled out grainy photographs before being arrested or expelled.
However, images and videos slowly began leaking out to the outside world. According to those who snuck in and were arrested, these sites were being kept secret by the Saudi regime, a theocracy that hid them from the world using fences and police and the threat of force.
Then the technology changed everything. In 2025, a private research team made a deal with Saudi officials. No boots on the ground, no excavation, just one drone carrying equipment that military organizations use to find underground bunkers and buried weapons caches. A phased array ground-penetrating radar system. Technology so powerful, it can map structures hidden beneath 100 feet of solid rock and create three-dimensional images of what lies underneath. The team programmed a flight path over Jabal al-Lawz, launched the drone, and waited. David Chen was the first to see the data stream in. At first, he thought it was interference, noise, some kind of system error. But when he ran the calibration check, the readings held. He called out to his supervisor. Then, the project lead came over. Then everyone else. For 3 full minutes, nobody spoke. Chen later described the moment in an interview. "I have mapped underground weapons facilities. I have scanned collapsed mine shafts. I know what natural formations look like on radar. This was none of those things. This was architecture. The radar had detected structures, rectangular chambers arranged in grid patterns beneath the surface, walls meeting at perfect 90-degree angles, corridors connecting rooms in layouts that looked planned, deliberate, intentional. You do not find right angles in nature. Erosion creates curves. Tectonic shifts create chaos. But the scans showed order, the kind of order that only comes from human construction. The depth readings placed these chambers roughly 40 feet below the current surface, buried by millennia of landslides, erosion, and the slow accumulation of desert sand. Sealed, intact, waiting to be found. But here is the catch. This was not a small shelter or a single room. The radar detected a network of chambers spanning over 300 feet, large enough to hold thousands of people, large enough to match the biblical description of 600,000 men, plus women and children, gathered at the base of the mountain of God. The team ran the scans 3 times. They checked for interference. They recalibrated every sensor. The data held. Something massive is buried under that mountain, and it has been there since the time of Moses. If you want to see what the surface evidence reveals, and trust me, it gets even more incredible, hit subscribe now. Because what researchers found above ground matches the biblical account with disturbing precision. Evidence carved in stone. The underground chambers were just the beginning. Once the radar data went public, researchers started examining older reports from people who had managed to visit Jabal al-Lawz before the restrictions. What they had documented will send chills down your spine. Start at the summit. The rock at the peak of Jabal al-Lawz is black, not weathered black, not stained by lichen or mineral deposits. Scorched black, as if the stone itself had been subjected to intense heat. Every other mountain in the surrounding range is light-colored granite, tan and gray, normal desert rock. But this one peak looks like it was dropped into a furnace. Geologists who analyzed samples found evidence of thermal metamorphism. The rock had been altered by temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. That is hotter than flowing lava. The kind of heat that turns solid stone into something else entirely. Now picture what the Israelites would have seen. Fire pouring down from the sky. Smoke so thick it blotted out the sun. The entire mountain glowing like a forge, while the ground shook beneath their feet. The summit of Jabal al-Lawz still bears the scars of that moment. 3,000 years later, the rock is still black. Now moved to the base. Explorers found a massive boulder split cleanly down the middle. The crack is smooth, almost surgical. The two halves sit separated by a wide channel. The ground around it shows heavy erosion patterns. Water erosion. In one of the driest regions on Earth, imagine 600,000 men, plus their wives and children and livestock, wandering through the desert. Their water is gone. Their children are crying from thirst. The animals are dying. And then Moses walks up to a boulder, raises his staff, and strikes it. The rock splits open. Water pours out in a torrent so powerful, it carves channels into the stone. Enough water to satisfy millions of people and all their animals. The split boulder at Jabal al-Lawz still stands. The erosion channels are still visible.
Way to Mount Sinai, the Israelites camp where there's no water. Moses goes up to a distinct rock and strikes it with his rod, and miraculously, water pours forth for his followers. The historian Josephus said that the split rock could still be seen in his time, and it was so big that it could not have been moved.
In a region where it almost never rains, the evidence of a massive, sudden water flow remains carved into the earth. Near the base of the mountain, researchers discovered a large stone platform. The stones are cut and deliberately stacked. The dimensions match descriptions of altars used in ancient Israelite worship. Around the platform, they found burnt animal bones. Chemical analysis dated some of them to the late Bronze Age, the exact period when the Exodus would have occurred. Exodus 24 describes Moses building an altar at the base of the mountain and offering sacrifices. The stone platform at Jabal al-Lawz sits in the right place, from the right time, with evidence of exactly the right activity. But perhaps the most controversial discovery was the petroglyphs. Carved into rocks near the site are images of cattle, bulls with curved horns. In several carvings, the images show people bowing before these animals. This matches the story of the golden calf. While Moses was on the mountain receiving the commandments, the Israelites grew impatient. They melted their gold jewelry and fashioned an idol to worship. Moses descended, saw what they had done, and destroyed it. But the memory remained. The rock art at Jabal al-Lawz suggests that memory was carved into stone by people who were there. The sacred memory here is something most people miss completely, and it changes everything. The Bible suggests Mount Sinai was already holy before Moses ever set foot on it. In Exodus 3, when Moses first encounters the burning bush, God tells him to remove his sandals because the ground beneath his feet is holy. Not that it will become holy. The ground already is holy. The sanctity predates the arrival of Moses. Moses had been living among the Midianites for 40 years. He had married a Midianite woman. Her father, Jethro, was a Midianite priest. Moses had spent 4 decades immersed in Midianite culture, tending sheep in their territory, learning their ways. If the Midianites considered a particular mountain to be holy, Moses would have known about it. Archaeological surveys of the region around Jabal al-Lawz support this interpretation. Researchers have discovered extensive Midianite settlements in the surrounding valleys. Distinctive pottery decorated with geometric patterns that date to the late Bronze Age. Copper smelting sites where the Midianites processed ore from nearby mines. The Midianites were not primitive nomads. They were a sophisticated people with established territories and religious practices stretching back generations. They knew every peak in their landscape. They would have assigned meaning to the unusual ones. And Jabal al-Lawz is deeply unusual. A blackened summit rising above tan and gray neighbors would have demanded explanation. A split boulder showing evidence of water in a waterless region would have inspired stories. The mountain carried sacred memory before Moses arrived, and the people who lived near it never forgot. Generation after generation, fathers told sons, mothers told daughters, elders told children. The mountain of Moses, the place where fire descended, the ground where God spoke. This was not abstract theology to them. It was local geography, part of their lived landscape. They kept the memory alive through thousands of years of unbroken oral tradition. Meanwhile, 1,500 miles away in Egypt, Byzantine monks were guessing. They had no connection to the original tradition. They had texts and legends and political motivations, but they did not have the continuous thread linking them to the actual events. Western academics dismissed those Bedouin traditions for centuries. They called it folklore, superstition, the wishful thinking of uneducated desert dwellers. But now the radar, is confirming what the locals have said all along. The Bedouin were right. The academics were wrong. The mountain is real. The chambers are real. What remains sealed? So where does this leave us? 40 feet beneath Jabal al-Lawz, a network of sealed chambers waits in darkness. 300 feet of underground rooms that no human has entered in 3,000 years. Rooms that could contain artifacts, records, or objects we cannot even imagine. The blackened summit still bears witness to fire that burned hotter than lava. The split rock still shows the channels carved by water that should not exist. The altar still holds the ashes of sacrifices made in the late Bronze Age. The evidence is overwhelming. The location matches. The geology matches. The archaeology matches. The oral traditions, preserved by Bedouin tribes for 100 generations, have been vindicated by 21st century technology. The only question left is what else is down there. Some researchers believe the Ark of the Covenant could be sealed in those chambers. The Ark was built at Mount Sinai. It vanished from history before the Babylonians destroyed the temple in 586 BC. What if it never left the place where it was created? We do not know, not yet. But the mountain that was forbidden for decades has finally started revealing its secrets. And this is only the beginning. If this video opened your eyes to what might be the greatest archaeological discovery of our lifetime, smash that subscribe button right now, because the secrets buried beneath the sands of Saudi Arabia go far deeper than one mountain, and we are just getting started.